Welcome to season 3 of the Upper Bowl Perspective, a Utah Jazz podcast proving that the fans sitting in the nosebleeds know just as much as those sitting courtside. And we are so excited to be back, bringing you more content as we go into another offseason. For those of you who are new listeners or just catching back up on the program, we are an off-season Utah Jazz podcast. During the season, there's a ton of content, people talking about what's going on in games, what is going on in real time. But for us who are huge NBA fans, who are huge about like the draft, about building teams, the offseason is one of the funnest times of the year for us. And we want to be a program that brings you more information about what's going on with the Jazz during the offseason so you can better know and have a better idea of what to expect when the Jazz actually start playing basketball here later this year. But Kyler and Landon, we've taken about 9-month hiatus since we last did a podcast. How are you guys feeling now that we've gone through a full Jazz season? I mean, last time we talked on the pod, we still hadn't seen Walker Kessler play a game. Lauri Markkanen was still, is he going to be a good basketball player? And everything has changed for Utah Jazz. So I'd love to just start off by hearing how are you guys feeling a year removed from the Rudy and Donovan trades and about how you feel about the Jazz's future.
I think for me, obviously, it was well known that I was all for the Jazz blowing it up for a long time. I was super happy when they did it. I was frustrated that they kept winning because I really wanted to get at the top of this draft. But at the end of the day, I think the value you got from learning just how impactful Walker Kessler could be, like you said, and then Lauri Markkanen's breakout season, just seeing maybe the start of a core for the next iteration of the Jazz was more exciting, even though I really wanted to get at the top of this draft. Was probably a little bit more exciting for the future of the franchise, I'd say. So I think the Jazz are in a really, really good spot.
Yeah, I'm feeling good right now. I think if you go back to the podcast we did last year, the first one that we did, we were very pessimistic. We did not have a lot of good things to say about the Jazz. And I think we're in a position now where we're a lot more hopeful. We've got some great talent on the team already. We've got a ton of assets going forward with a lot of options. There's a lot of directions the Jazz team can go. I think we've got the flexibility to kind of, go with the flow, go with, kind of events that will unfold and make the best decisions going forward. So I'm very excited to see what the next couple seasons in the Jazz look like together.
Yeah, I think especially at the beginning of last season's pod, kind of like Landon was saying, we were just so upset with decisions that had been made. We were frustrated with the Rudy Donovan pairing. We didn't really see much of a future for the franchise because given where the roster was a year ago, we didn't see how the Jazz could actually build to be a championship contender. It was really hard to see that path. And now that the Jazz have gone into blow it up mode, we got a lot of good pieces we can build around. We may not be a great team next year, but at least we have hope for the future, which is really what the podcast is going to be about today. Is the Jazz have 3 first-round picks in the upcoming draft. We just had the draft lottery. The Jazz kept their pick at 9, and we also have 16 and 28 from previous trades. And as we look to see how the Jazz are going to turn into being this young, scrappy team with a lot of good young talent to actually hopefully eventually being a title contender, this is going to be a huge day that's going to impact the Jazz for the next several years, depending on who they draft and whether they turn out to be great players that we can build around going forward, or whether they turn out to be solid role players that help fill in the cracks, or whether they just be complete whiffs that we go on to rue the day that the Jazz drafted so-and-so, kind of like how I feel about Udoka Azubuike and a couple other players that we don't need to go into right now. But for the pod today, we specifically want to bring you content on who the Jazz could potentially pick at each of their picks. So 9, 16, and 28. And the way we're going to do this is a little bit different than we've done before. We have each selected one player that we would love the Jazz to pick at each of these 3 positions. And just so you know, kind of the process we took to eliminate certain people that we weren't allowed to talk about, Rookie Scale actually went through a bunch of mock drafts and came up with like a weighted average of each individual player. So we had to pick a player off of that scale that was within like at least 1 or 2 picks of where the Jazz are going to be picking on that weighted scale for them to qualify for us to talk about them. So we each have one player we're going to talk about, kind of give you why we would love the Jazz to draft X player. And then one of us is also assigned to be the devil's advocate. So as soon as that individual goes through and tells us why we should draft player X, they're going to come in and do the exact opposite. Here's the exact reason as to why you should not draft player X. So we're going to get a little spicy. There's definitely going to be a little bit of hot take Sunday right now, but we are excited to see and give you a better idea of why we think you should and should not draft some of these individual players. So we're going to start off. Tyler, he's going to have the first pick for us and who he would have the Jazz draft at 9. And as soon as he's done with that pick, Landon, get ready to play devil's advocate. After that, we're going to have Landon, who's going to give us his pick. I'll play devil's advocate. And then it'll be me. I'll tell you my pick. And Kyler's going to play devil's advocate. So let's go ahead and get started. Kyler, give us the floor. And if you were Danny Ainge, who would you have the Jazz pick?
All right.
Number 9.
Well, this is actually not who I would have them pick. Let's be honest about that. This is just one player. This isn't my top rated player. I actually, for the 9th pick, got the last picks, but I am still excited about this player, Taylor Hendricks, out of Central Florida. He is a 6'9", 210-pound guy who's gonna be in his best at the 4 position in the NBA. His calling card right now is being able to defend all over the floor. He's got really good burst and athleticism to play defense. His kind of secondary rim protection, they had him play a lot as a center in college, but I think he'll be more of like a secondary rim protector in the NBA, is something to really get excited about. Something that I was really pushing for the last iteration of the Jazz to get at the 4 with, the Rudy Donovan era, was a little bit of secondary rim protection. But now that we have Walker Kessler, who looks like at least defensively will play a similar role to Rudy, right? The high-end rim protector. Teams are going to push that player out of the paint, right? And so what do you need? You need somebody that can come in and protect the rim in a pinch. Taylor Hendricks, I think, is going to be elite at that. In terms of perimeter defense, he's not like this guard 1 through 5 kind of guy. I'm not claiming that. I think very few of those guys ever exist. But I think off ball on the perimeter, I think he'll be best used in kind of like a roamer role, like the Bucks employ oftentimes with Giannis. But he makes plays, gets his hands in passing lane, comes up with blocks, comes up with steals, deflections. He's a hustle player on defense. I think perfect complement to Walker Kessler. Also a perfect complement to Walker Kessler on the offensive side of the ball, and the fact that he was a 41% catch and shoot 3-point shooter last year. And this wasn't a guy who's taken one a game. Like, he was looking for his shot, has a quick release. I thought it was consistent, gets good elevation. And so that's kind of the floor, is this shooter who plays really good defense. And then on top of that, the reason I like him is that he also has a little bit of a ceiling. He showed flashes of being able to handle and create and pass. Now, those flashes were very few and far between. That's probably why he might be available at 9, is because oftentimes when he handles the ball, it also doesn't result in the best. But he shows the flashes there, which is the upside. I think the floor is a really high-end 3-and-D player, with like really high-end on the D side, and then maybe can be a little bit more than that. And so that's why I think the way that he complements what we already have, it combines the high floor with, some ceiling there as well. I think that's why I would take Taylor Hendricks at number 9.
Go along with that. I do love Taylor Hendricks in a vacuum. I think he's a little bit of an underrated draft prospect, being honest. My concern with him with the Jazz specifically is I feel like he has quite a bit of redundancy when it comes to we already have it for with Laurie. Laurie can be, a catch and shoot guy. He can take the ball off the dribble a little bit, plays the 4. Laurie is obviously a little bit taller. I do think Taylor's defense is a little more versatile than Laurie's is. But again, I have a hard time seeing what his role will be with the team, with both Laurie and Kessler kind of locking down and playing a lot of minutes front court for us. My concern would be that he would kind of get pushed to the side, not get the minutes he would really need to develop. At the end of the day, we wouldn't necessarily have. I'd love for him to be able to play the 3. Having 7'4", 6'9" 3 sounds awesome. But again, I don't think his skill set is quite refined enough to play the 3. As you alluded to, he doesn't quite have a handle. I don't think he can quite, be that offensive threat you'd want him to be at the 3. you'd probably have to play the 4 and some 5, but again, I don't have a lot of room necessarily play those positions. I think there's other players we could get at that position that we could utilize more, and we could really give them the opportunities that they need to actually develop into good players.
Yeah, I think for me, I think to answer your devil's advocate in full would be a whole another segment on another podcast about Lauri Markkinen. But just the short answer of it, I guess, is the Jazz played Lauri at the 3 a lot last year. Like Lauri was often utilized as a 3 with Kelly Olynyk, Walker Kessler, Lauri Markkinen front court. I think I don't love Lauri at the 3 long term either, but it seems like the Jazz don't mind it. And honestly, I just think the Jazz need to, again, to give my full thoughts on this, maybe more of a podcast. I think honestly, getting somebody that pairs with Walker Kessler would be my priority, maybe a little bit more than Markkinen, just because those are the guys that are going to be on the same timeline, right? And so I think with Kessler, that's the perfect complement. And so that's my short answer. I could go to a lot more detail. Like I could talk 10 plus minutes about this topic, but that's kind of my short answer on it.
Which, granted, in the offseason, we're going to have a lot of opportunities to talk about that. I think talking about Lauri Markkanen's role is going to be an awesome discussion that we're going to want to dive to in a future podcast. But there's Taylor Hendricks. A lot of people have him going in that 7 to 10 range. So he might be there for the Jazz, and he's definitely a great person to keep your eye on if you're looking for who the Jazz are going to pick up. We're now going to move over to Landon. He's going to be giving us his pick that he would take at number 9, and I'll be playing devil's advocate. I have a contact I need to go take out because it's driving me crazy, but I don't even need to hear Landon's positivity on his player. I know who he's taking. I have a lot of thoughts and feelings. So, Landon, you try to convince everyone as to why they should take this player that I, not only for the pod, but just in real life, do not agree with at all. And then I'll be back to give you my thoughts on why it would be the worst pick in Utah Jazz history over Dante Exum. I'll be back. Thanks.
Wow, worst pick ever. Okay.
It would be the worst pick ever. That's an over exaggeration, but go ahead.
So with my pick, this again just goes more on like availability than anything in this area that they're drafting. I'm gonna go with who a lot of people looked at, and that's Grady Dick. Grady Dick, he's got good NBA length. He's 6'6". He's got a decent wingspan. I think it's about 6'8". He's fairly versatile offensively. Doesn't have the deepest bag in the world, but his jump shot is nothing less than orgasmic. He's got a perfect shooting form. Kind of play off the ball, great spot up shooter. He's a good cutter. I think he's underrated in that aspect. He's very kind of Klay Thompson-esque in the way he plays, I feel like. And I think he kind of fits well with what the Jazz are building right now. And I think he fills a need that we have at that 3 position. Yeah, and I do think that Lauri's best position would be at the 4. So complement him, complement Walker Kessler. We need spacing. We need perimeter shooting at the 3. And I think he might just be the best perimeter shooter in this draft class. Yeah, so I think he fits in there. Now, obviously, I think one of the concerns you have with him is his defense. He's not the greatest on-ball defender in the world, especially for his size, and his vertical quickness isn't quite up to like what a lot of other players would be. But he did average above average in steals in college last year. He's very opportunistic in that way. And I think having someone like Walker Kessler be a rim protector would really cover his flaws as a defender and allow him to kind of play in a defensive role that he'd be more comfortable with, being, someone who can pressure the ball and then be like a help defender. So that's why I like Grady Dick.
All right. So I missed the first part of Landon's explanation. I assumed it had to do with like, great shooter, secondary playmaking, whatever. Landon, here's how I'm going to do my devil's advocacy. I'm going to read you a draft overview of a player that sounds a lot like Grady Dick. And then I'm going to have you guess who said player in this draft guide is. All right?
Yep.
This prospect is a three-point marksman who might be the best shooter in this draft class. He can get spicy hot from downtown and is deadly accurate when given space to shoot. He also has a very quick release and doesn't need much time or space to get his shot off. They have shown huge improvement over their time at college, not just with shooting, but with his cutting, driving, and overall offensive package. He's never going to be an elite above the rim player or high-end athlete, but he's got enough burst to hold his own at the NBA level, although he'll probably never be a real standout on defense. One of the safer bets in the mid-first round, but certainly not the highest upside player. His shooting should translate, but he's a good decision maker and knows his role and will be a valuable piece of an NBA team. That sounds a lot like how people are describing Grady Dick, but Landon, who do you think that is actually describing?
So this is from like a past draft class.
Yep.
That sounds verbatim like what they said about Grady Dick. I don't know. Jimmer Fredette. Is that Jimmer Fredette?
No. Maybe not worse than Jimmer Fredette. He was terrible in the NBA. But Tyler, just for fun, do you have a guess?
I thought it was Jimmer too.
Oh, really? No.
Yeah.
It's Corey Kispert. This was the draft analysis for Corey Kispert, which is extremely similar to Grady Dick. And Corey Kispert was one of the big whiffs I've had in the last, few drafts. I really liked Corey Kispert. I thought he was going to translate really well at the next level. And Corey Kispert, I think he was 8th last year in shooting for the Wizards, like in terms of percentages. Like, I think he shot over 42% from three last year. But ESPN also has him ranked as like the 27th best player at his position in the league, which is not great at all. And I have a personal rule when it comes to evaluating draft talent, which is if their only real calling card is that they're a really good shooter, lack of defense, lack of ability to do much else at a high level is going to mean that they're probably not going to translate very well to the next level. Even though these aren't like the same types of players like Georges Niang, right? You watch him where he can shoot, but he's such a liability on the defensive end, it's hard to put him out on the floor. Or like with the Heat right now, who are making an awesome run, Duncan Robinson was not playing any games until Tyler Hero got hurt, and now he's like got reincarnated where he's actually playing some minutes. But even Duncan Robinson, he wasn't really playing any minutes either. So this is my big issue with the Grady Dick pick, is that he is somebody who I think is going to be a great shooter, and he might even be a very high percentage shooter. But you need to be so much more than that to be like an actual, like really good rotation guy on a winning team type of player. And with Grady Dick, I think he's going to be an absolute liability on defense. I don't think he's ever going to be even a decent defender. And I don't think he has enough of an offensive package or really any other skill set that's going to translate to the NBA other than shooting, which I think is going to make him incredibly hard to stay on the floor. Like, I just don't think he's going to be getting a lot of minutes on a decent team at all because he has such a limited skill set that's going to translate to the next level. So there is my analysis on Grady Dick. I do not like him as a pick. If the Jazz still have, like, if he's still available at 28 and you want to take a flyer, sure, go for it. I won't be too upset. But to take him at 9 when there's so many other players with like more skills that you could see translate to the NBA, I just think this is way too high for somebody like a Grady Dick, who really the only thing we think is probably going to translate is the shooting.
I mean, I think his shooting is absolutely like his NBA ready skill set, but I do think he's got potential as far as being like a pretty good finisher. And he's shown good like cutting instincts. I think he's a little quicker than people might give him credit for. He's been able to finish pretty efficiently near the rim. So I think his threat as a cutter, as well as someone who can kind of, come off pin downs, is something that should translate. Again, who knows? But I think
you may have cut out.
Yeah, I think Landy just cut out.
I'll just give my quick 2 cents since he cut out. But I think Landon's too high on him and J Bobby's too low on him. I have him as a 17th ranked player on my board. I see your argument that if he's only a shooter, how effective is that in the NBA? I think that's going to come into play later in this podcast, this very same podcast. But I think of kind of the high-end shooters of this draft, Grady Dick is the better at the complementary skills. So I think if you're looking for the high-end shooter, Grady Dick is the best selection. I don't think the fact that you said he's never even going to be decent defensively, I don't agree with that. I think he can be okay. I just think he's not going to be a very versatile defender. never going to be a plus. But I think of kind of the guys that are the shooters of this draft class, he might actually have the best chance to be not a sieve defensively.
Well, I guess we'll see. I mean, it's actually funny. A lot of the mock drafts that I've seen come out the last, week or so, a lot of them have actually had Grady Dick going to the Jazz. So there seems to be a lot of like some buzz there, but really hoping it doesn't happen. Landon, thank you for letting me just absolutely just shit all over your prospect. But we will see what happens with Grady Dick in this upcoming season. All right. Now it's my turn for my pick at number 9 in the draft. And I want to give you some thoughts as to why I decided to take this player here and why I currently have him as number 5 on my big board. I was watching game 2 of the Lakers Nuggets series and just watching LeBron and Jokic play, like two of the best players we've had this century, both just phenomenal. And despite the fact that they play different positions and have some different skill sets, I was just amazed at how much better they made their teammates. Just seeing how LeBron was getting guys open, just seeing how Jokic was making incredible passes. And I was thinking about, I would love for the Jazz to have somebody like a LeBron or a Jokic who they're just always making the right play, which I mean, like I saw your face, Kyler, but like the type of guy that just makes his teammates better, right? Making the right play, always looking out for their guys, trying to get the high looks, doesn't really make a whole lot of mistakes. And I think especially where we have a young team with a lot of young talent, like Walker Kessler, like with Agbaji, with whoever else we get in this draft, I want a player that is going to make everyone else on the roster better because they play with this person, even if they're not going to be like a LeBron or a Jokic-esque player. And that's why for my pick, I have Anthony Black out of Arkansas. He's 6'6" with a 6'8" wingspan, which is fantastic size for his position. If there's like a pure kind of floor general in this class, Anthony Black would definitely be like that guy who you would say would fit that mold. He's a fantastic playmaker. His passes are fantastic, especially in transition or the pick and roll. He's always looking to make that extra pass and get a guy open. And you can just see that in a lot of these games, how just his ability to look for guys and to make the high AQ play resulted in a lot of easy baskets for his team. He's also a fantastic defender. He has that really, really hard to find combination of being quick enough that he can guard guards effectively, but also has the size and the strength to guard bigger wings. Once again, like I said, 6'6" with a 6'8" wingspan. He's got fantastic size. So he's someone that you can see, like not only is he a feisty defender who makes a lot of smart defensive plays, really, really active hands, he'll be able to be just an absolute nightmare for teams on switches because of he has the ability to guard. The one big question with him is going to be, is he going to be able to score effectively at the next level? He only shot about 30% from 3 last year on decent volume, scored less than 13 points a game. But despite the fact that he isn't an elite scorer coming into the league, he definitely has a lot of flashes that show that he could get better in those areas. He has great shiftiness as a ball handler. He's somebody who already plays with a lot of pace on how he's able to knows when to slow things down, when to speed things up. And that high EQ style of play that he has, he gets himself a lot of opportunities that other players might not get with just how he reads screens or how he drives to the basket or how he gets open shots in the mid-range. And the one skill set he does have on offense that looks like it will translate is that he's a really solid driver. He can get to the basket. He makes a lot of tough angles off the backboard. He has a really nice like floater at times. And he draws fouls at a really high rate at the college level, which you hope would translate to the NBA. So there's my love letter to Anthony Black. I just think he's the type of guy who, even though he may not be the flashiest prospect in this draft, he's going to be the guy who plays awesome defense, who makes everyone better on offense. And when he has a chance to make an offensive play, he's going to be the guy who will be able to deliver for you. So I absolutely love Anthony Black as a prospect. And if the Jazz are able to get him with the 9th pick, I will be absolutely ecstatic.
All right. So before I play devil's advocate, I just want to preface the fact that I'm doing this under duress. I have been assigned against my will to play devil's advocate for Anthony Black. I am as high on Anthony Black as anybody will be in this draft class, except for maybe his mother. I love Anthony Black. However, I think it is pretty easy to play devil's advocate for him. And while I will believe a few of the things that I will say, I know what my counterpoint is to them. So I'm interested to see what yours is. Like you said, Anthony Black impacts the game positively in a lot of ways, particularly defensively, where I think he will be good. I will push back that with his strength, I don't think he's very strong. I think he can be someday. He's not there yet. He's 6'7", but only like 200 pounds, and Scoot Henderson's 6'2" and 200 pounds. So strength, I think he can get backed down by guys that have some strength. But yeah, you definitely project him to eventually be that, switch everything 1-4 potentially. And the Jazz really, really, really need point of the pack defense. I'm trying hard not to start advocating for the guy. I'm playing devil's advocate here. My main devil's advocate, and what I've been really, really focusing on with this draft class, is what is this player in the playoffs? And when you look at an archetype of Anthony Black, what has this archetype been in the playoffs? Name me what kind of impact this type of player has had in the playoffs. Now, I'm going to bring up an extreme example, who I don't think Anthony Black is as shot deficient as this guy, but we saw a guy like Ben Simmons dominate the regular season when he was a regular season player, win all NBA selections. As soon as he got to the playoffs, you get defended differently. People find your weakness. If you have a very defined weakness in the NBA playoffs, it will be relentlessly attacked. And you will be asked to be a scorer. Anthony Black has not shown any ability to be that. And so, yes, will he be a super fun player in the regular season? I truly believe that. What is he going to be in the playoffs? I tend to actually like guys who don't have the highest percentages in college, but I judge whether or not I believe in their shot developing on a couple of things. One is how confident were they in shooting it. And while Anthony Black, like you said, he had decent volume. He wasn't afraid to shoot it. I also look for consistency in their shot and just kind of how long it looks like their shot is going to have to develop. And his shot it's not a pretty shot either. It's not just like, oh, that looked like that should have gone in, but it didn't. No, his shot does not look like it's going in most of the time he shoots it. It is a shot that is very far away. I think in terms of a driver, you said he's a plus driver. I agree in some sense. It's not like he has this deep bag. It's not like he has elite first step explosiveness. And so if people are playing off of him and asking him to shoot, he's not going to still be able to get to the rim. He's not that elite level player at getting to the rim. And so I really, really question, most of all, what is this player in the playoffs, and how is he going to be able to respond to being defended differently once he gets there? Because honestly, maybe you could think of one for me. I can't find an archetype of that player that's been really impactful in recent playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're going to make an argument, then that's a really great argument to make in terms of being a devil's advocate. But I think here's what I would say for Anthony Black. I think we all have certain things that we look for in terms of, is a player going to be able to develop into somebody who will be a great player in the playoffs? And I think and instead of giving you an archetype of somebody that I think they would be like, I'm going to give you somebody of who I definitely don't want to be in the playoffs and why I think Anthony Black is different. D'Angelo Russell in like the last 3 games playing for the Lakers is a -53. And he was supposed to be this like great shooter who could like be a little bit of a heat check guy, come in, score a lot of points. And because of his decision making, because of his lack of defense, and because of just those limitations he has as a player, both as, how he plays and just his like very limited skill set on the defensive end of the floor, he's been incredibly impactful in all of the wrong ways for the Lakers as they're trying to play in this Western Conference Finals. And when I look at a guy like Anthony Black, sure, he may not be the elite scorer that somebody like D'Angelo Russell can be at times, which granted, like I'm being very careful with that. D'Angelo Russell can go off at times and be a great scorer, but the reason why he's so bad and why he's not going to get as many minutes, why he's losing minutes to other guys like Rui Hachimura and everything, is because he's not doing those things that are making the people around him better. And I think that'll keep Anthony Black on the floor because he's going to make the high IQ play. He's going to play great defense, and he may not be a great scorer in the playoffs. The hope is that he'll develop into that. But I think just when you look at, is a guy going to be impactful in the playoffs? I look at defense and I look at decision making as two of the most important things that'll keep you out there, which I think Anthony Black just has in spades. And I think as he works with guys like with Will Hardy, with the Jazz development staff, who's one of the better developmental groups in the league, I think he's going to become a better scorer. Will he ever become elite? We'll see. But I think that he at least has enough there that you super, super value in the playoffs, that he'll at least be impactful in some ways, even if he doesn't ever become like an elite shooter or a guy who can take over and score like 15 points in a quarter.
I think I agree a little bit with Kyler on this pick, though, in the sense that I think in the NBA level, your ability as like a playmaker, as kind of an offensive setter, is very contingent on how versatile you can be as a scorer. And like what you can do as a playmaker is very limited if everybody's going under, screen set for you all the time. I think you need to have a jump shot that's at least respected in order to get an offense going, and get that motion moving. So that would be my concern with him, just not respecting his jump shot and then just very much limiting what he can be as a passer.
I also feel like he is a good playmaker and one of the better in this draft class, but I know you kind of recanted it after I showed my reaction, but like invoking the playmaking levels of Jokic and LeBron, he's a good playmaker. He is not near the level of those guys. And alluding to what Landon said, their ability to score is what makes it easy. If everyone's playing for you, if they're playing the passing lanes, playing the driving lanes, and asking you to be a scorer, you have to be like one of the best playmakers in the history of the NBA to still be making a really big impact playmaking offensively. So yeah, that's a big question mark. Like I said, I know what my answer to that question is, but I'm here to play devil's advocate, so I'm not giving it to you. So, but that's.
Well, thanks, Kyler. I appreciate that.
Yep.
All right, now we're going to go into round 2 of this draft extravaganza. We're going to be going through who we think the Jazz should take with their 16th overall pick. We're going to go the same order as last time, starting off with Kyler, with Landon playing devil's advocate. Then Landon will go with myself playing devil's advocate, and I will go last in this round with Kyler playing devil's advocate.
I think that was the exact same as round 1, right? Round 3 is the only one that's different. But anyway.
Yeah, it is the exact same.
Let's go into Jalen Hood-Schifino. This guy is my boy. I love Jalen Hood-Schifino so much. I haven't really been talking about where everyone ranks on my big board yet, but Jalen Hood-Schifino is number 10 on my board. He's only number 17 on consensus board, so decent chance he's available for the Jazz pick. I think he's a top 10 player in this class. What Jalen Hood-Schifino is, he's a 6'5" point guard who, again, excels at defense. So the Jazz really need a defensive point guard, and this is probably the best defensive point guard class I've seen in a long, long time. There's a lot of guys with plus size and good point of attack defense. I think Jalen Hood-Schifino is probably the third best point guard defender in this draft class, at least in terms of right now. Maybe there's some guys with better defensive upside, but really good at being tough, physical, doesn't give up on plays, will fight through multiple actions should he need to. He's not like an elite tier athlete by any means, but he's a good enough athlete to really kind of stick with most people. I think you could say this about pretty much any defender, maybe the very quickest in the league he's going to struggle against. But like I said, there's a very short list of people who don't. I think mostly excels as an on-ball defender, not like the biggest playmaker. He does make some plays off the ball, but a really good on-ball defender. Offensively, this is a high volume, pick and roll, ball in hand, on ball, just kind of floor general, like we talked about with Anthony Black. Also similar to Anthony Black is he's not the best 3-point shooter at this point, but I do think he excels in passing. I think he's got a much tighter handle than a guy like Anthony Black. His pull-up mid-range game is really, really good, which I think separates him from a guy that we just talked about in Anthony Black. I believe a lot more in the shot. Again, what I look for is how confident is he and how consistent is the shot. I think it's really good on ball. I think his catch and shoot game needs a lot of work. And so I do have a lot of questions about him as an off-ball player, and I'm sure Landon will bring up some of these points in his devil's advocate. He's a guy who needs the ball in his hands, but I really think the Jazz need somebody who can they can run their offense through, right? They have guys that they run it to, you know. You like Walker Kessler finishing plays, you like Lauri Markkanen finishing plays, you like all these guys finishing plays, but there's not a lot of talent in the form of making plays for others on this team. I think Jalen Hood-Schifino is going to be really good at that. Pick and roll with Walker Kessler and Jalen Hood-Schifino. I can already see it already, and it already makes me smile. He's a guy that I honestly wouldn't even hate at 9. Like I said, I have him 10th on my board, but there's kind of a consensus top 9 in the class. So he falls outside of that, and you'd rather just have one of those consensus top 9 players. Yeah, I'm sure I could talk about him more in my rebuttal to your devil's advocate, but I want Landon to get a chance to say why Jalen Hood-Schifino isn't a good pick for the Jazz.
Yeah, I got some concerns with him. I agree with your defense. He's probably one of the better defensive point guards in the draft, which is very valuable in its own right. Right now, like if you can stay in front of a point guard in today's NBA, that is very valuable. He's got a lot of question marks on the offensive end of the ball, which kind of has me very concerned. First of all, overall, he's not a very efficient scorer. It probably has to do with his volume mid-range shooting. He only shoot in college 41% field. You expect that to get better in the NBA. Due to the size and athleticism that he'll be going up against. He only shot about 33% from 3, so he's not a very good 3-point shooter. And again, he's not the most athletic guard in the draft, which makes me concerned about his ability to get by people and finish strong in the lane. So I'm concerned you're going to have the situation where he can't really shoot threes that well, can't really finish at the rim. He's going to be very dependent on the mid-range. And he's capable of that. He's very good mid-range, like pick and roll type scorer. But I'm concerned he's going to fall into like Donovan Mitchell syndrome, right? Where he's great when defenses play like drop coverage on him. He can just kind of feast the mid-range or make plays out of mid-range. But as soon as you switch that up, as soon as you play a switch on him, I think it's going to completely neutralize him on the offensive end. And I don't know if he's going to be very serviceable on that end at all in those situations, which he will face in the playoffs, as we've seen in years past with the Jazz. So I think I'd like to see someone who at least has a little more offensive upside than him at this pick, someone who can help space the floor and kind of contribute to what the Jazz are doing offensively. That's my main concern with him.
Okay. I mean, that's fair. Like if you want to talk percentages, his percentages are not good. And like I said, I just believe in what I saw in the games that I watched that it's going to get better. That I think a lot of his bad percentages were Indiana was like the classic college offense that ran through a 6'9" guy who can't shoot outside, played a lot in the post. I think spacing will actually help this player. And in terms of his shot, like when people are going, like this guy is very willing to shoot. It didn't go quite in as much. I think might be wrong. I might be thinking of a different player, but he's one of the few draft prospects you'll ever see who actually shot worse in catch and shoot than he did off the dribble threes. Like with the ball in his hand, I think he's good at reacting to what the people are doing. If you're going under, he'll shoot the three. I think I saw just when Indiana got eliminated in the March Madness tournament, like Indiana was kind of looked like they were done. The dude just came up off the dribble, pull up, deep threes, just hit 3 in a row. Like just like flashes like that are so much more promising to me than just like one season's worth of he didn't shoot that great of percentages. So I think they'll translate. Again, that's a risk that I took I take a lot with a lot of prospects. I say, hey, here's the percentages. Do I think from what I saw, this jump shot has a good chance of improving? I just think it does with Jalen Hood-Schifino. I think you're right in the fact that he doesn't possess the athleticism to put a ton of pressure on the rim. I do think he has a good floater. I think he has good counters to that. And I'm not going to say he's going to be this player, but kind of like how I phrased to Jay Bobby, what kind of player is this guy going to be? I can kind of see Tony Parker-ish impact where it's a lot of floaters, it's a lot of mid-range, it's a lot of playmaking, and then you're just a good defender, right? You're not asked to be I don't think he'll ever ask to be the main scorer. I think his bag is good enough to be more of a secondary scorer and just getting your offense through actions. I think he's good at making high end reads with his passes. And so, again, I don't think I'm not saying he's going to be Tony Parker, but just kind of that role in an offense, I can easily see him executing at a high level.
Yeah, and that's fair.
You have any
I love
shot?
Jalen
Yeah, I was going to
Hood-Schifino.
say,
I
I
mean,
know
it's
you love
like,
him too.
yeah, I mean, I love defensive guards with size who at least have some upside on offense. Like, I just did my love letter to Anthony Black, and I think Jalen Hood-Schifino is kind of in a similar mold as him. Um, I think Landon's concerns are valid, but I think Kyler's argument is also valid. Like, I hate being like Switzerland in this, where I like agree with both of you, but I think that he has some upside that if he can develop a little bit more as an offensive prospect, I think he could be somebody who could be very, very impactful at the next level. So I would love if the Jazz can get him at 16. I think that would be a steal of the draft kind of area for him. But I guess we'll see what happens. But there's definitely some question marks with him, which will be interesting to see if he can overcome those at the next level. All right, Landon, you're next.
With my pick at 16, I actually have someone who's kind of similar to Jalen Hood-Schifino. I've got Nick Smith Jr. He's a 6'5" point guard, but when you're at Arkansas, and I like him again because he's got great size at that guard. Something I love more than anything, an oversized point guard, which is what's exciting about this draft. There's a lot of guys like that. I like him in particular because I like his athleticism go along with, I think, what might be a little more of a polished offensive skill set. He's got a great first step, not like S tier. He's not like Jaden Ivey of last year, but a lot of his highlights, if you look at him, is just him beating his defender off the step and back cuts and things like that. He's got a pretty good handle. He's got a solid jump shot. He can kind of score in all three levels. Not the most physical finisher in the rim, but again, I think he has the ability to get to the rim, kind of finish well there. I also have a lot of confidence in him as a playmaker. I don't think his college stats really reflect as good of a playmaker as he is, but I think looking at him play, I think he has great, good, solid basketball decisions with the ball. He's someone I would trust on the long term. Obviously, I think the biggest question mark on him would be his knee. I know he battled through a knee injury this year. And knee injuries have plagued many good NBA players and ended a lot of careers early. But I think if that his knee is fine, I really like his potential. I think he could really be a solid starting guard in the NBA.
All right. So whenever I like to evaluate prospects, two of the first questions I always ask is how high is their floor and how high is their ceiling? And when it comes to the guys who could potentially go into the lottery, because there's been some lottery buzz around Nick Smith Jr., he's one of the guys that I could see with having one of the lowest floors and also one of the lowest ceilings. And here's why. He played 17 games last year due to knee issues, but he was not efficient. Like, he projects to be someone who can be a great scorer, and he just wasn't that at all. He wasn't efficient. Last year, his field goal percentage was 37%, and he was only 39% from two. And he made a lot of really questionable decisions. I mean, you would see him pull up for long twos like early in the shot clock, or you would see him just make bad shots where he could have made a pass. And he seems like a guy who wants to be like the guy. He wants to be that scoring offensive threat, but he just doesn't have the offensive game, I think, to justify how aggressive he plays in regards to scoring. He tries on defense, I'll give him that, but he's pretty lean and he's not strong enough. So I think he's going to be really targeted at the next level just because I don't think he's going to be able to absorb contact with bigger, heavier guys at all. And even when he does drive to the basket, he has a tough time absorbing contact, which just makes me a little bit worried because you mentioned, Landon, that you think he could be a three-level scorer. And just the way that I see him, I really doubt his ability to score around the basket. I think the mid-range is probably the one that's most likely to translate. But then from three, he just wasn't very efficient from three either. So when I look at his floor with the knee issues and with the decision making, is he a guy that's even going to be able to stay in the NBA? I think that's a legitimate possibility for him. And then if I look at his like the best version of Nick Smith, is it a spark plug guy off the bench? Like, is that his best role in the NBA? Like, is his the best scenario for him that I can see, not even being a starting caliber player in the league, which that's what makes me nervous because he's supposed to be a scorer, but he's not efficient. I mean, last year in 25 minutes per game, he had 1.7 rebounds and 1.6 assists average in over 25 minutes a game. All he does is score, and he doesn't do that at an efficient high level. So I think Nick Smith could be valuable for somebody looking for a guy to come in and play for 12, 15 minutes a game and just score when your leading scorers go and take a break on the bench. But I have a tough time seeing Nick Smith as a guy who can actually grow to be like a high level starting caliber player in the league.
Yeah. And I think I don't want to say it's particularly fair to judge him a whole lot off of his college stat sheet, mainly because he was battling through that injury and the sample size was so small. Keep in mind, he was one of the top prospects in the whole country coming into college. I think that, battling through that knee injury and just getting time really hindered what he can actually do. I think he's got a lot more upside than what you'd see just kind of looking at his stats. Again, got a great jump shot. I think that's something. Defensively, he's got the quickness, I think, to stay in front of his everybody. He's not very disciplined on that end. I think he'll have to be coached up as far as fouls. But if he can bulk up, get a little smarter, get a little more coached on that end, I think he could be actually a pretty good on-ball defender. I do think he also has a little more control than we give him credit for. I think he's got this rare combination of fitness and control that you don't see very often with players at his age. But I just think the combination of all those things, I think, gives him. But again, it is a risk. I think he might be the biggest wild card.
Yeah, I think if I was to be the mediator here, I would say I'm more in the middle, but I agree more with Landon than I do with J Bobby here. The low floor is absolutely there, but the low ceiling I absolutely disagree with. Landon brought up the sample size. I also think just taking his season stats is not fair at all. His pre-injury stats and his post-injury stats are wildly different. If he would have just decided not to come back after his injury, he probably would be a lottery pick. He was awful when he tried to come back from his knee injury, and that tanked his season numbers because of the low sample size. That like those games that he played after his injury just made the few games he was actually looking pretty promising earlier in the year the overall season stats. So I wouldn't take season stats into consideration with him at all. He is a very high upside swing. He's 185 pounds. He's razor thin. He needs to bulk up if he's going to be anything other than an absolute liability defensively. I also think the playmaking is a lot of a project. I think the only thing that I'm confident in is his three-point shooting off the catch is actually really good. I think he can play on and off ball. I don't think he needs to be the guy at all. He was very, very comfortable in catch and shoot situations last year. And so I like him. He's not in my running for 16. I just think if you're looking for a point guard, there's guys who are better defensive playmakings. And even if you want more scoring, Kobe Buffkin, I would rather take over Nick Smith at this point, which we're not going to talk about him today, but I would love to talk about him on another podcast. I love Kobe Buffkin as well. I just think point guards in this class, there's so many, and I would love to talk about them all. But Nick Smith, I think is more of like a combo guard. I don't know if he'll ever be a passer, the level to be a true point guard. But I do think, like, if you're looking for the upside swing, which it looks like Landon is at this spot, because he went for more of the safe guy at 9 with Grady Dick. If you're looking for upside, I do like Nick Smith as an upside swing. I just tend to like the upside swing at 9 and then the safer pick at 16, just with how this draft is shaken up.
I think Nick Smith, like, there's definitely a lot of question marks. I think we'll definitely see how he goes into the year. The hope is that whoever he ends up with, that he's 100% healthy, and we'll see if he can reach some of that potential that he flashed earlier in the year before he got injured. But all the best to Nick Smith Jr. If he comes to the Jazz, I promise I'll love him, but we'll see what actually ends up happening with him on draft night. All right. So now it's my turn. Landon went for more of an upside player with his 16th pick. I'm going to go for a guy that I think is a little more of a safe pick. Maybe not the highest ceiling, but I think he's got a really high floor going to the next level of competition in the NBA. And that is Jet Howard. He's a 6'8" wing out of Michigan. I first learned about him when I was just going through some general like draft guide stuff. I was just looking at other people's opinions before I trying to figure out who I wanted to really deep dive on. And Kevin O'Connor at The Ringer had him compared to Desmond Bane, which you guys know that in that draft, I loved Desmond Bane as a prospect. And so when KOC had Jet Howard as one of his comps, I was like, I got to look into this guy. And I was just watching more and more tape on him. He's someone I really fell in love with and would love the Jazz to pick up. He shot 37% on three last year on 7 attempts a game, which is pretty impressive at the college level. And he has a lot of upside as a 3-level scorer. He might have what might be one of the best floaters in the draft class. And he also flashed that he can be a pull-up threat from mid-range. So he projects as a guy who could be a really like solid offensive threat from all 3 levels going into the next game. And the fact that he's 6'8" as a wing, that's obviously great size. He's the son of Juwan Howard, who played 19 seasons in the league and was an NBA All-Star. And you can see that he's somebody who sees the game at a higher level than most other college players. He plays smart, he knows his role, and he's a guy who tends to make the smart play, at least on the offensive end. Now, if you're going to make an argument against him, it's that the defense could definitely use some work. His lateral mobility is not great. Sometimes his awareness on defense was a little bit laughable, where you would just see guys blow by him where he would miss like a switch or something like that. He did get better over the year, and he did become a better defender in those areas, but there's still not near enough of a sample size to say that he's now going to have fixed those defensive issues we saw for most of the season. But what really made me fall in love with Jet Howard was watching him during the second half of the Ohio State game and then overtime, and just watching how hard he played on defense and how impactful he was in that overtime situation. I think in the last few minutes of regulation and overtime, he had like 3 or 4 on-ball stops. I believe he had 2 big blocks, and his impact he made led them to an overtime win against a good Ohio team. And that just made me think that that's the type of guy that I would love to see on the Jazz, is a guy who has a good skill set, has good size, maybe not perfect on the defensive end, but he was somebody who might have been Michigan's biggest game of the year, at least in the regular season. He was a guy who shined in their biggest moments, and obviously getting a guy who can shine in the big moments is obviously something that you look for in a prospect. So do I think he has the most upside at 16? No, I don't. But do I think he's a very safe prospect who could play really well next to guys like Markkanen and Kessler? I think that he would fit very seamlessly into the Jazz's system due to his shooting ability and his size.
Before I start my devil's advocate campaign against this player, how long ago roughly was it that you saw that Bane comparison to Jet Howard?
I want to say it was just a couple weeks ago.
Really? That's a terrible comparison. I'll just say that. Sorry, KOC, but that's terrible. Okay, so with that out of the way, sorry to KOC. I love the guy, but that is not a comparison. Jet Howard. The pros, like you said, are there. Impact player, 3-level, maybe. He can't put pressure on the rim. Like you said, he does have a floater, but the guy is just one of the least athletic guys that's going to go in the first round of this draft, if not the least athletic guy that will go in this first round. Has no burst. Going to do a lot of his scoring, basically shooting off of screens or attacking an overzealous closeout. We talked about a similar player like this shooter in Grady Dick. I think has a better handle and maybe better passing than him, but defensively, you said he got better throughout the year. I thought he got worse. During the time when he was kind of hot and maybe viewed as a lottery prospect, everyone's like, his defense isn't that bad, and he's this great shooter. Well, and then later in the year, I feel like everybody realized that his defense actually was terrible. And so I'm going to phrase a similar question to you that I did with Anthony Black. What kind of player is he going to be in the playoffs? I brought it up with Anthony Black, and you brought up D'Angelo Russell. What has made D'Angelo Russell, which, by the way, was an apples and oranges comparison that I don't know what you're doing there, And what has made D'Angelo Russell minus 50 something, whatever you said in the playoffs, right? Every single possession that D'Angelo Russell is on the floor defensively, he is in the Denver Nuggets action. Why will that not happen with Jet Howard, with how atrocious his lateral quickness is? Put him on the perimeter and have him be forced to switch onto that team's best ball handler and scorer. Why will they not have Donovan Mitchell versus Michael Porter Jr. bubble playoff performance?
Which I think that's the big question, is obviously the defense and how he'll do in switches. I think the two things that I would say about that is, one, this is a question mark. And if you're drafting him at all, it's under the assumption that he's going to get better on that end. The idea is that once he gets in a better strength and conditioning program, hopefully he does get a little bit more quick. I don't ever see him being like he
lacks athleticism. It's not technique. He literally isn't. The guy just doesn't become faster and more quick. He can maybe a tiny bit, but he is the worst in the first round, probably.
I think that he definitely has the upside to get better, but then he also has the great size as well. He's 6'8", so even though obviously you would rather see more athleticism and more quickness, which I think some of that quickness is going to come with a good strength and conditioning program, but the fact that he's 6'8", just the fact that he has the size, I think he'll be able to make up a little bit for his lack of athleticism with his really good size on the wing. That being said, you're not drafting him because you expect him to ever be a plus defender, but it's, can he be a decent enough defender with a guy like Kessler backing him up? And can he make a big enough impact on offense where he'll still be okay? Which, the fact that he is 6'8", the fact that he can score, and the fact that I think he is going to get better on defense when he gets to the next level with time. I just see him as a guy who he's going to make a great offensive impact. And I think as long as you can make him not a complete liability on defense, then I think he becomes a valuable player for your team.
And I think the chance of that happening is so incredibly minuscule. He's just there's only so much you can do about a guy who's not athletic. There's only so much you can do. And like you said, their size, they're 6'8". Michael Porter was 6'10", and Donovan Mitchell shot 80% against him in that playoff series. Michael Porter's not a worse athlete than Jet Howard. I'll tell you that.
But it's I think if you look at one of the most fun players the Jazz have had in the last 10 years, someone who is not athletic at all and was super slow, you have a guy like Joe Ingles, right? Super slow, but he played good defense because the technique was there and because he had pretty good positional size. I'm not saying that Jet Howard's ever going to become the same defender that Joe Ingles was, but I think Joe Ingles was able to prove that you can be a not elite athlete and be really slow and still be a really solid defender. He made Paul George look pathetic in that one series. And while I don't think Jet Howard's ever going to be that, I think we have seen examples of guys not being elite athletes who have still been able to be very impactful players, both in the regular season and the postseason. And I think that's what you're betting on with Jet Howard, is that as much as I'd love for him to be an elite athlete, which he's not, as much as I'd love for him to have great lateral quickness, which he doesn't, I think we have seen some examples in the league of guys like a Joe Ingles who, by working really hard, by being in the right places, by playing super smart, have been able to make up for it in other ways. And that's what I'm hoping that we can see Jet Howard turn into a little bit down the road. So that would be my rebuttal to your rebuttal. I know he's not a great defender, but we've seen it happen where really slow, unathletic guys have been positive defenders in the NBA.
All you're saying
can't
is,
happen.
My final thought will be, you said you're betting on it. I will be the book. Please place your bet with me. I would love to take that bet for you. That's all I'm going to say.
I'll Venmo you after this. We'll see what happens. I'd love to see the odds.
Yeah, I don't know what the odds are, but I'll whatever they are, I'll take them because you're giving me free money.
All right, perfect. So that is the end of round 2, where we talked about Jalen Hood-Schifino, Nick Smith Jr., and Jet Howard. Let's go ahead and take one more quick break, and then we'll be back with round 3. Here we are back for round 3. You guys know the drill. We're talking about our favorite prospects that could be there for the Jazz at number 28. Kyler, once again, is going to start us off, where I'll be the devil's advocate. Landon will then go next with Kyler being the devil's advocate. And finally, I will go last with Landon being the devil's advocate. 28th pick could still be valuable. We see it happen all the time where late first rounders become incredible players. Like, for example, Jimmy Butler, 30th pick in the draft. So hopefully the Jazz will be able to find a diamond in the rough here at the end of the first round, and we'd love to talk about it. So, Kyler, who would you love to see the Jazz use their 28th pick on?
Well, you see, the man very blurrily pictured behind me is a man by the name of Maxwell Lewis, who is a wing scorer who played at Pepperdine. So, those were some high quality competition he was going against. What he projects as is basically just like a project. I typically fall in love with somebody like this in the draft every year, who has some length about him, usually a good athlete. He's probably like on the lower end of good athlete. He's not a great athlete. Usually the guys I fall in love with are more athletic, but showed scoring upside, but maybe weren't super efficient with it. Just show me flashes of something that could make you an NBA player. Show me length and athleticism enough that you could be a two-way impact player. And I think that's what we see with Maxwell Lewis. He is thin. He's going to need to bulk up to ever be a positive impact defensively. I actually thought he did a decent job. Like, he was stronger than he probably should have been. He was like decent at stopping people from backing him down at Pepperdine, but like, he wasn't facing the strongest people in the world. Let's be honest. So I think he will need to bulk up to still hold that point of attack at the NBA level. But good enough athlete, showed the good enough flashes to be a defensive player. And then offensively, the reason I kind of fall in love with these players is at this point of the draft, you're not asking somebody to be the number one option. And this guy was the number one option at Pepperdine, and he doesn't have like the elite athleticism to get to the rim at will or anything. I think he's got a decent first step. I think he's got a decent bag of moves. I think he's a decent passer. And then I think his inefficiency was because he was asked to shoot some really, really tough shots. He just wasn't able. He's just not going to be asked to. On catch and shoots, I can't remember what his percentage was. It was a good percentage. You would be happy getting that catch and shoot percentage at the NBA level. The reason his overall 3-point percentage was so low is that less than half of his, like much more than half of his 3-point shots were contested off the dribble, but just because everyone around him sucked. I was once on a junior Jazz team where I was the only guy who knew how to dribble a ball. And I'll just tell you, I wasn't efficient that year. I'm not saying I'm an NBA caliber player, but like, when you're the only one to guard on the team, it's going to be really tough to be efficient is all I'm trying to say. And so this is kind of like the high upside swing that I'm down for. Just kind of how I see this draft shake out. I like kind of at 9, you can get this combination of high floor, high ceiling. I like some high floor players in the 16 spot. And then I just want to go absolute swing at the bat, high upside. What can Maxwell Lewis be? I think he can be a catch and shoot player on off ball, can be maybe like a tertiary playmaker on the offensive side that plays good, not elite, but good defense and can keep him on the floor. And he's one of the few guys that I can look at and actually convince myself he could eventually be a starter, not a high-end starter, but actually like a starter, like a nightly starter for an NBA team. And so that's why I like Maxwell Lewis in this spot.
Yeah, and I think just me being, like playing devil's advocate here is that when you look at guys that could potentially go in this range, he's definitely someone who you could see maybe having that higher ceiling. And then just like the argument that you would have against that would be he could also be somebody with a low floor, which it's just going to depend to see if he actually can become like a good NBA player. You already talked about the strength of competition playing at Pepperdine. He was playing against a bunch of guys who are not going to be professional basketball players at all compared to other guys who are playing, like these blue blood schools or something like that, where they're playing against guys who could be in the NBA. It makes it a little bit easier to project that they might be better at the next level. And with Max Lewis, there's just really nothing that you can look at there and say he's been able to prove anything against higher level talent, but he was quite good at a lower level. It'll just be, can that translate? At the next level, he projects to be a 3-and-D guy. Like, that's what you hope he becomes. And even at Pepperdine against lower competition, he wasn't particularly great at either of those. And part of that was due to his like just the role he was asked to play with like the level of skill of his teammates. But he only shot 35% from three, and he really struggled to create separation and draw fouls. So he seems to be, which granted he's going 28th, but not a very complete offensive player at all. And on the defensive side, while he has pretty good size, his lateral mobility isn't great. You would see even while playing at that lower level, he was getting beat by quicker guards quite a bit. So you wonder, is he going to be a guy who's, I mean, like you hope that he becomes a good, even if not a great defender in the NBA. And for me, it's just a little bit harder for me to get there, just seeing that he struggled to do that a lot of times, even at the college level, playing against not elite competition. So if you're looking at this saying, I just want to swing for the fences and say there's enough flashes, I think Max Lewis is like a good prospect if that's what your goal is. But for me, if you're looking for a guy that maybe has a higher percentage to just be a guy who can be in your rotation at some point, this is where maybe that's a little bit more iffy for me, because I can just see a lot of situations where his defense doesn't quite translate, or he doesn't have enough of an offensive skill set where he's just standing in the corner and can't really play defense. And does that guy really become like a playable player at the NBA level? So for me, it really comes down to there's just so many question marks around Maxwell Lewis and if any of his skill set is going to translate to the NBA level. That, well, I think he's a decent flyer at this range. I just kind of worry if we've really seen anything that would suggest that he's going to be good at any particular skill set in the NBA. So that's kind of my not super fiery rebuttal as a devil's advocate, because
Yeah, dude,
I mean,
it's a curveball over the plate. I already got my responses locked and loaded. This is easy, man.
which yeah, it's like I know you got your. I actually really like Maxwell Lewis at 28 if I go on my devil's advocate, but like really like the big thing for him is just I don't see any one skill set that's going to like that I feel confident is going to translate to the NBA. There's a bunch of skill sets that I'm like, I maybe give it like a 20% chance that that'll translate. And what are the chances that just none of them translate? And I think that that possibility is pretty high with him. But if you are trying to take a flyer, then he's not a bad pick at this spot of the draft.
Yeah. Well, first off, like you're talking about low floors, like just show me the hit rate of 28th overall players being rotation pieces, and I'll tell you that there everybody has a low floor at the 28th overall pick. Show me a player whose floor is an NBA level player, but also has some upside at this spot. Show it to me, and I'll gladly recant, but it's not there. And I think, like I said, catch and shoot, his percentages are much better. I think they're high 30s. I'd have to relook it up. I don't have all these percentages in front of me or anything. But, and then I think also with the defensive issues that you mentioned, they're there. I think they're technique based. I do not think they're athleticism based. And like the other side of, low end schooling is he getting the best coaching? I put up a picture of Jalen Hood-Schifino earlier. He was getting coached by Mike Woodson, a former NBA coach. The difference between getting coached by Mike Woodson and probably who's getting coached, no offense to the coach there. I'm just saying those schools typically don't spend a lot of money on coaches. And so I think he can coach the technique issues out of his defense. And I just say, yeah, the floor is low, but so is everyone's unless you're going for literally no upside. So I just think since the percentages at 28 are already so low, might as well go upside swinging.
Which I think if there's going to be one pick that you might have at 28 for the draft, you may have a higher floor, but a tiny, tiny ceiling. It might be the guy that Landon's going to talk about now with his number 28 overall pick. I know that Kyler has been waiting all week to play devil's advocate on this, but Landon, you are up and try to convince Kyler as to why the Jazz should take this player at 28. And I'm just going to sit back and enjoy because I know it's coming.
This pick, I want to take my guy Jamie Jaquez Jr. My reason being, at this point in the draft, I'm not necessarily looking for who's going to be, my next franchise player. My whole idea around here is like who can be a serviceable NBA player, who can survive in the league. And I think he's a very well-rounded player who kind of knows his role and plays within himself. So I don't think he's going to make a lot of poor decisions going into the league. He's fairly efficient scorer. He averaged about 50% from the field and shade under. Good mid-range shooter. Not a very good three-point shooter, but he still does have good size. He's about 6'7", 220 something. Not the quickest dude in the world. So I don't necessarily love him playing like on the wing, but if you could convert him to a four, I think he could be very serviceable. He'd be a great pop partner. Good plays out of the post. Maybe put the ball on the floor, make some things happen from here and there. But I think he could be a very solid glue guy in the NBA given the right role, right training. So that's why I want him. I think he could be someone who could play for a while. Not a superstar, never going to be an all-star, but just a serviceable player who can, do the things that you need to get done on the floor.
All right. So Jaime Jaquez. This is like the typical great college player, but is going to be ass in the NBA unless he's asked to do one thing and one thing only. All right. So you look at, yes, he scored a ton. He scored efficiently, right? You nailed it. Basically, every touch he had was isolation, low post, go get your bucket. We're clearing out for you, right? And how often are you going to get those scoring opportunities in the NBA? A lot of your scoring when you're getting drafted at 28 is going to be coming off ball. And off ball, he's maybe a serviceable catch and shoot three-point shooter. He's like at average there. It's fine. It's not going to be a weakness for him, but it's not going to be a calling card. And then defensively, I mean, if we're not talking about Jet Howard having the slowest feet on defense, we're talking about Jaime Jaquez having the slowest feet. You guys let me play DA against the two people that could potentially go in the first round that I am the most confident will not be able to defend a soul on the perimeter that might go in the first round. They are slow as buns. Maybe can get away guarding fours and fours only. That's the only position he can guard in this league because he's pretty well built. He can probably hold his own. He's got the size, like he said. But the thing is, once you get to the playoffs, once again, it doesn't matter where you want on the floor. You were getting high ball screen switched onto that person's, and he has no shot. If you want, I'm the book for J Bobby on Jet Howard, I'll be the book for you on Jaime Jaquez on if he's ever able to defend a soul at the NBA level. I think he would be a good pick for one particular type of team. A team who's got like maxed out books, who's just like their starting roster, their big three or whatever, super expensive, and they just really, really, really need a cheap off the bench bucket. Because if you ask him to just score, just, hey, we're going to give you the ball in our second unit and you're going to score, and we're not asking you to do anything else, 15 minutes a game, just go get us 10 points, 8 points, 12 points, he can do that. He cannot do anything else. And I don't think the Jazz are at the spot where they need somebody who can do one thing and nothing else on the floor. And so I think Jaime Jaquez, I actually don't hate the pick in this range in general. I just hate it specifically for the Utah Jazz, where we don't need just an off the bench bucket. I think that's actually one of the things, guys who could just come and create a shot for themselves. That might be the one area off the bench. Like that might be the one area where we're towards the top of the league. We got THT, we got Colin Sexton, freaking Dunn came in and started just being a bucket off the bench. We got those guys when our team was competitive. It was Jordan Clarkson. We got plenty of those guys. I think we need a lot more complementary skill sets, off ball, high impact players, and that sort.
I mean, who's to say like how many of those guys are going to stick around long term? We don't even know if Clarkson's going to do that in these things. It's not. So I think having someone off the bench who could be valuable. I agree with the defensive concerns, especially in the playoffs. Again, we do have good rim protection that I think could kind of make up for those deficiencies where you switched onto.
Do you not remember the Jazz playoff runs where that was their strategy?
Did you watch Rudy Gobert play basketball in the playoffs for like 5 years?
We got Rudy Gobert behind him.
We're going to have so many better perimeter defenders, though.
Still, it doesn't matter. Like, if you have one weak perimeter defender in the playoffs, he will be attacked every single possession. You can have freaking Marcus Smart, Drew Holiday, and Paul George beside him. It's going to be a one-on-one action with Jaime Jaquez and Jamal Murray, and Jamal Murray's going to cook them for 50.
Right. Well, I mean, again, I do think that like positionally, he's got potential to be a solid defender if he's guarding fours. He's got the size for it. So that would really only be an issue in the playoffs. And who's to say we even need him in the playoffs at that point? And I just like his ability to add another dimension to our offense and give us kind of a solid mid-range option. Defense is kind of target either our perimeter game or us getting to the rim.
I actually loved Jaime Jaquez as a college player. I actually had his team winning March Madness this year, which obviously that didn't go very well for me in my bracket. But I think Kyler kind of hit it on the head is if I don't hate Jaime Jaquez at the end of the first round as a prospect, but the best place for him is to go to a team that has championship aspirations and is in cap hell where they could just get a good player for super, super cheap. That can be like their eighth or ninth guy on the roster. Like somebody like the Warriors, I think he would be a fantastic pick if the Warriors could somehow get a hold of him in like the late first round as just a cheap guy who can come and play a little bit, or even someone like the Lakers. I think he could be somebody who could play well, for a team like that where they have that star level talent, they have the good starting level players, but they just need somebody to cheap to come in and score a little bit when their best players are getting some rest. So do I hate the range for this? No. But do I hate him for the Jazz? I would hate him for the Jazz. And this is a guy who thought he was going to lead his team to an NCAA championship. So there's my thoughts. But anyway, I love the spiciness. I love the passion. Let's go on. I didn't even
put his picture up. I just want to say one more thing. I forgot to put his picture up. Also, he looks like that. That ain't a good NBA player. Look, he's going to be the ugliest guy on the Jazz if they pick him.
Looking like Adam Morrison doesn't help him.
I think that was the boldest statement you've made is it'll be the ugliest player on the Jazz because I think you forget that we have Kelly Olynyk. And he is
dude, give me Kelly. Give me Kelly.
Olynyk's dating like a supermodel.
Dude, that's because he's money. Money, dude. Money's talks. All right.
Cool.
Also, I butchered his name, and I want to apologize for that.
Yeah. It's Jaime Jaquez.
Jaquez, not Jamie Jackass.
Jamie Jackass.
Jamie Jackass.
Well, Jimmy Jackass. Chucking threes.
All right. It's all right. We forgive you. Jaime Jaquez, we apologize from the Upper Bowl perspective for butchering your name. But then again, I mean, like, I once heard David Locke call John Morant Jay Morant like 6 times in the same podcast, so you don't have to feel too bad, Landon. All right, going on to the last pick. It's a guy that I love. Kyler just brought him up. And if you're more of a casual draft fan or mostly look at guys who are playing in college, then you may not even know who this player is. But Bilal Coulibaly is a guy that I think has maybe some of the best upside in the draft. And I just love him as a prospect. He has been playing in France for Metz 92. He's been playing with Victor Wembanyama, which is actually where I first saw him and learned about him as a prospect, is that I was just watching all these Wemby games and just loving seeing Wemby play basketball. And I'm like, who is this other guy? Like this lengthy wing who's playing good defense and he's making smart plays. And so I first saw him maybe 5-ish months ago, just saw him as a player, and I've seen him shoot up the draft board since then. But for people who don't know who he is, he's a fantastic, kind of 3-and-D-ish athlete. He's 6'7". He has a 7'3" wingspan. So the dude is super, super long, and he is a very good athlete for this range in the draft. There's a lot of plays where he's jumping up to get a rebound or to dunk, and his head's basically at the rim. He projects to be what could be a very impactful wing defender in the draft. He's very, very pesky. He's got that great size, and he's also a pretty efficient rebounder for his position. Even playing with 7'5" Victor Wembanyama, he was averaging 4.5 rebounds per game, which he was doing because he was quick, he was opportunistic, and he was able to get in good position to get those rebounds. From an offensive standpoint, he has pretty good stats and he's shown some great flashes. He's not projecting to be an elite offensive player by any means, especially right out of the gate. But he was a pretty good shooter. He shot 35.7% from 3 on 2.5 attempts per game, which is pretty good. But his true shooting was at over 62%. He takes most of his shots from 2. And with his athleticism, he got a lot of easy buckets just getting out in transition or slashing to the rim, where he played really, really well. The one question that you might have for him is how much of that's actually going to translate to the next level. I mean, he was playing with the best draft prospect that we've seen since at least LeBron. And you could see how he was able to take advantage of a lot of situations where people would come and double Wemby, and then he would be able to cut and get open and get an easy shot. And then plus he was playing in France, which, I mean, the competition in France isn't going to be like the highest level of competition that you can find for a prospect. But I think between his size, his athleticism, I think he's going to be a solid defender in this league. And I think he's shown enough flashes as an offensive player that I think he's somebody who, can you bring him over? Can he be like a solid 15 to 18 minute a guy type of player who plays really good defense and plays okay offense? I think that's somebody that he could, I think it's very possible for that to be his reality in the NBA. So he's definitely kind of one of those guys who might have a higher ceiling in this range, but just because of his competition and who he was playing with, there also is the argument that he could have a lower floor. But kind of like with what Kyle was talking about with his pick and Max Lewis, I would love to see the Jazz swing for the fences with the 28 pick. And I think getting somebody who could be super impactful in this range, I think that Koulibaly is definitely an awesome pick here.
Yeah, to play devil's advocate for him, first of all, what you brought up is the fact that he looked incredible, like playing, looked like a freak athlete. But it's tough to tell how much of that is just him playing against, these little French dudes. And it's funny, he's probably like you could argue he's like the second most scouted player in the entire world because of his proximity to Yama. But I do think we have a fairly good idea at this range of what he is and what he's going to be in the league. So again, my concern at this point would be his potential upside. I do think he has a fairly high floor, but I think he has a very, very small ceiling. I'm concerned about his 3-point shot translating. Like you said, I don't think he's going to get a lot of more open, better looks than he got playing in France. And I don't necessarily trust his jump shot to develop that much. So I really think he's going to be very dependent in the league on his athleticism, on his hustle. I could see him being maybe like a Jared Vanderbilt type player, but more athletic, but someone who's just, very hustle, very active on the boards, and then tries to get open for, the open corner three. But if that three pans out, I just don't know what his place is in the league. Granted, his defense is there, or at least has the potential to be there. But it's so tough to tell just with the competition he's playing with how well he'll be able to go against NBA level athletes. And really, if that defense is there either, I don't think he's really very long.
Which I mean, like you brought up, like could he have the same impact as Jared Vanderbilt? Dude, if we can get somebody with the 28th pick who's as impactful to winning NBA games as a Jared Vanderbilt, then we hit a freaking home run with the 28th pick. And I mean, we will definitely see how much of this translates. He is like a super scouted person just because of his proximity with Wemby, but it's also hard to know how much of that's going to translate. But you also see a lot of the flashes that if he's in a good situation as like, somebody who defenses maybe sag off a little bit because they're worried about like a Markkanen or Kessler in the paint or somebody else, he's not going to get as good of looks as he got with Wemby, but you did see him take huge advantage of every opportunity that he got. And I think we will see that he's going to take advantage of whatever opportunities he gets offensively in the NBA. And being such a late pick, like he's not going to be someone who defenses are going to be crowding or putting their best defenders on. And I think until that happens, I think he's going to be somebody whose defense at least is going to translate to at least some level. Whether it becomes like an elite great defender, we'll see if that happens. But he's got really good athleticism, especially for this point in the draft. He's got really good size. And I think that he's someone who, if nothing else, he'll be a really pesky point at the attack defender who can slash on the other end and be effective in transition. And if that's all you have, that's a really valuable player to have on your bench. And if his upside's more than that, then that's great. But I think just based on the skill set and the physical tools that he has, I think he's somebody that I can see as having one of the highest floors in this place in the draft, if even any of it translate, which I think we have enough of a sample size to say that there's a decent chance that it will, which we'll see if it happens. But I can just see like Koulibaly being someone who becomes like a steal of the draft just because of how effective he is on the defensive end of the floor. And anything you get on offense is just going to be like extra.
I don't know. I think he's got to have both. He's got to be able to knock down that open shot consistently at an NBA level. He's also got to be really good. Otherwise, he's either going to be like a spacing nightmare or he's going to be a liability. So he's got to have both. If he does that, then I do think that he could have a pretty nice career for himself in the league.
I guess my 2 cents on the guy. I mean, he's an upside swing to me, and just because of the athleticism, and you never like athleticism unlocks so much in the game of basketball. And basically, I'm okay with pretty much any high ceiling swing that the Jazz make. I think um, he's going to need to be like the guy who's has like the least amount of role on offense because I don't think he has the handle on the decision making to be anything higher than that, at least now. Of course, that can be developed, which is why he's an upside swing. But yeah, probably needs to bulk up a little bit too. I mean, he doesn't look super thin in this photo behind me, but he's he's winning on defense a lot because he's pesky and really quick and athletic, but probably going to have some strength issues. So he bulks up. Does that affect his quickness? You just never know. So it is a risk. It is a high upside swing, which again I'm fine with at this point in the draft. That's what I want at this point in the draft.
Well, Kyler, Landon, I just got to say, after like a 9-month hiatus of doing these pods with you, it feels great to be back talking about Utah Jazz basketball. Um, Although I think we're still a little bit in mourning that the Jazz didn't move up into the top 4. We've talked about 9 prospects who I think every single prospect we talked about today is somebody that could have upside to be a really valuable player for the Jazz. And it's going to be fun. We have a young team. We have a fun team. And we have 3 first-round picks on draft night, baby. That's going to impact 82 games that we're going to be watching this season. So it's definitely going to be fun to see what happens and the further conversations we will have over the rest of the offseason. For all of our listeners, now that we're back, you can expect to see us dropping new episodes about once a week. If you have anything you want us to talk about, feel free to comment. We last year we had 4 or 5 people reach out to us saying, hey, we'd love for you to talk about XYZ. And if you comment and you want us to talk about it, we're probably going to talk about it. So we'd love to hear your thoughts, anything you would love for us to dive into for our podcast in the future. But this has been another edition of the Upper Bowl Perspective. Thanks to Kyler and Landon, as always, for willing to talk some basketball with me. And we'll see y'all next week.
Ciao, ciao.